after a several long day hiatus, Nintendeen is back. And considering the timing, I think he made this video because of Arlo tackling a similar topic. So he's trying to grift off of the Muppet.
Anyway, let's get back to the main topic here, because Mario Kart World, just like the Nintendo Switch 2, is also turning 1 year old. And without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most, if not the most controversial game releases ever in the history of Nintendo is Mario Kart World.
Yeah, this is so delusional, you can't even really laugh at it. You're telling me this game is more polarizing than Star Fox Zero or New Super Mario Bros. U or Nintendo Land or like... There are just so many Nintendo games over the past several years that have had all these issues with like the reception and people complaining about them. Like, you're going to argue this is more controversial than Paper Mario Sticker Star? Like, are you insane? When you really break down the issue with Mario Kart World, it becomes very, very apparent that pretty much the only issue that anybody has with it is the price. And that's something that Nintendeen emphasizes very strongly in this very video. The only problem he really has with this game is the price point.
And the funny thing is, it has little to do with the actual game. Note that I said little to do and not nothing to do. Now, let me make something very clear. I've kind of said this a bunch of times before, but just to reiterate this. I have full access to a Nintendo Switch 2. From the day that it launched, one of my closest friends bought one and allowed me to borrow it anytime I wanted to, and since the console launched, I had a few friends buy it, then even most of them actually resold it.
This has to be the biggest, most common cope among these kind of like pretendo YouTube channels. They always do this thing where they're just like, oh, I would never buy a Nintendo Switch 2 with one game. But thankfully, I have somebody who would buy it for me and then let me play it whenever I want. So I can cover all this content anyway. It's such an insane cope that it really makes no sense, because if you're still playing the console, if you're still playing the games, that means the console is desirable, you're still a fan, and that means it's worth paying for to play these games. And that's something that someone like Nintendeen will never accept and will just kind of like attempt to downplay through all these insane copes. But they have to do it, because if they're not playing the games, if they're not aware of what's going on, if they don't own the hardware, then they can't like complain about every little single thing that happens. And this is a real problem that these channels have, where they have to pretend constantly to be upset, jaded fans of the company while simultaneously like calling for boycotts and trying to create this illusion that he's like actively engaging in the boycott, even when he's actively running a Nintendo fan channel and talking about a lot of Nintendo products. It does not make any sense, and it is something that absolutely should be laughed at more often,
while straight up switching to handheld gaming PCs. But there is a Nintendo Switch 2 readily available for me to use at a place that's not even 5 minutes away from me, because in my friend group, it's very common for us to let each other borrow the hardware and gaming consoles. It's the reason why I have like 4 different handheld gaming PCs. They're not all just sitting on my desk, they're all being used by either friends or family. And on almost every single game night that we have, there is usually a Switch 2 there, but it's typically not being used.
So you're telling me that people are bringing a Switch 2 to your gaming nights and then not actually playing it? You're telling me that people aren't like buying their own Switch 2s so they can play Pokemon and other multiplayer games? You're telling me that nobody is playing the Switch 1, which is still being supported? Like, whenever he talks about this, like, oh, I have 4 handheld gaming PCs and I never play a Switch 2, that is very clearly not true, based simply on what he's saying here. You know, if he's actively saying that he's borrowing the Switch 2 to play games on it, obviously that thing is being used.
The one game that has been played the most, since it's the most casual friendly for the Switch 2 in our friend groups, is Mario Kart World. I've done all of the Grand Prix for Mario Kart World, I've played Knockout Tour, and I've even spent at least a few hours dabbling with the open world. I mean, I'm not going to criticize a game and say that a feature of it sucks without actually trying it. That would be disingenuous. But it's just not fun to drive around a giant open world with little to do in it. The P-Switch collection was nice, but that was it. And even then, it wasn't really that substantial. So it's like they made this giant jungle gym to play in, and it's the major selling point of the title, but there's little to no reason to actually play in said jungle gym.
Does he not realize that Knockout Tour is only possible because of this map? Does he not realize the intermissions are tied into the open world? Like, what is with this idea that like the game structure, the open world, it's only prevalent in the free roam mode? Because that's not the primary feature of the game. Okay, when you look at the game as a whole, when you look at Grand Prix, when you look at Knockout Tour, like the open world is inherently built into the design. The reason why you don't see more of it is because you're on a track and you're racing within an official circuit. Like, how else would a racing game work, really? So in essence, all this talk about how the open world adds nothing to Mario Kart World, it just doesn't really seem to want to acknowledge the reality of the situation, and that this is a racing game, and that the Grand Prix and Knockout Tour modes, you know, all the features in this game, they incorporate the open world into its inherent design. So all of these modes use the open world to some degree. Just because it's not open all the time in those modes does not make it stop being an open world. It's entirely because of how these games work and how they operate.
Think about all of the open world slop, as people online call it. All of the different games that people consider unnecessary open world titles. Those games typically have a purpose. Specifically, the open world nature of those games actually has a purpose. It has an objective. It has something for you to follow, a story. I mean, think of Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild also was a giant open world, empty space, playground that you can experiment in, but at its core, it had a story. It had some kind of form of progression.
First of all, is he really implying that there was nothing to do in the open world of Breath of the Wild? That's even stupider than complaining about Mario Kart World. But secondly, and this is something I noticed with Arlo as well, like, why are these people complaining about Mario Kart World not having a story? You know, they're acting like this is the big cardinal sin. Like, oh man, how dare Mario Kart not have a story? Oh, how dare they not have a deep, riveting plot about these racers and what they go through, and like, how dare they not go into Yoshi's and the ethics of the food they serve? Like, it just comes off like completely disingenuous, because you are complaining about a racing game not having a story. Like, did you think Diddy Kong Racing was like better than Mario Kart 64 because it had like some paper thin plot, you know, about some alien wizard coming down to the island and like forcing everybody to race? And like, it's just like nobody cares about that. Nobody looks back on that plot line fondly. It's not something that like actively makes the game better. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason Nintendo makes Mario Kart games, or the Mario brand as a whole, I would say, like this, is because it doesn't really need a story to make compelling, interesting gameplay mechanics. And I also love how he tries to say that Mario Kart's open world doesn't add anything to the experience, because it clearly does from a gameplay perspective. Like, we already addressed this, how the open world is utilized in the Grand Prix and the Knockout Tour mode. Just because you're on a track doesn't stop the game from being fully open world.
It gave you something to do, something to experiment with, which is good because it means that not only do you have a giant playground you can screw around in and have a lot of fun with, but you also have an actual tangible reason to go into the open world, even if you're not simply just looking for that playground. And it's more substantial than just going for the P-switches. I mean, think of something like Sonic Frontiers, giant open world. There's progression, there's a story, there's value, there's something that feels like it's more than just running around and doing random stuff.
I love how he cited Frontiers, as an example, instead of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, which did not have an open world. It was not as ambitious as this. It was not as good. This just goes to show you like what a grifting retard NIntendeen is. Because I remember last year he was trying to tell people that like Sonic Racing Cross Worlds was his favorite kart racer of that year. You know, better than Air Riders and better than Mario Kart World. And now he's not even bringing it up. You know, he is comparing a racing game to action adventure games. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. Like what he's saying is completely ridiculous.
Even Prime 4 had you bouncing around between different stages. Halo Infinite, the same concept. You're out in this giant open world. You can mess around, you can screw around, fight different enemies, but there's still a sense of progression, a story to follow. The open world is a means to an end. There are offshoots, different stages you can get to. I don't understand how they can create this giant open world, but not develop some kind of a story mode where you follow along and travel to different areas for a Grand Prix with a certain CPU that you can unlock when you accomplish that task. Why aren't there regularly just updated random challenges and races that just occur on the open world, where you now have a reason to head into a specific area of the map to race against an enemy and be rewarded with something?
What's with these people wanting to turn Mario Kart World into a gas? Like this is something that Arlo did too, where he's like, "Oh, why aren't there random events? Why aren't there challenges I can do?" It's like there are challenges in the game. You're just actively avoiding them. You're not playing the challenges that are already there, and you wouldn't play them if they had events in the game.
Why are there not like just random obstacle courses all over the place? Hidden time trials that regularly show up and get updated that allow you to compare your results with the rest of the online world? Why are there not like random missions that pop up where you and your friends can jump online and try to accomplish something together? Quite frankly, the intermission tracks could have been a lot cooler if they were somehow included in the open world, either as part of a main story or randomized challenges and events that just pop up throughout the year. As time goes on, they could have made it more interesting. Like they could have made it so that there's a track that specifically requires you to only use more of these parkour elements to win. And it could have been unlocked with an event where people all just meet up in a single location, they race it, and then after that, it becomes free for everybody to join in the regular cycle when you want to play online.
What is he talking about? There are challenges in the open world. There are things you can find and do. You can go online with friends and do stuff. So, like, I don't understand this mentality where, like, oh, man, they need active events to keep people playing. They need to be adding stuff to incentivize people to keep coming back. Like, no, they don't actually.
I don't think Mario Kart World's open world is necessarily bad, it's just they've done nothing with it. And that's problematic, because it is the primary selling point of the game, and it's a big reason why people are okay, or were okay, and defended the $80 price tag that was slapped onto the title. Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. Mario Kart World released as an $80 game. It was the first Nintendo $80 game, first of many. The Switch 2 ports of Mario Party Jamboree, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, for example, those are also $80 titles. But Mario Kart World did it first. And the ultimate defense, the big thing that they showed off about this game, was the open world. That was like from the first trailer. So that was supposed to justify the price tag.
No, that's not true. They explained why. The reason for it was because of the budget and how big of a deal this was for Nintendo, because Mario Kart is their absolute best-selling franchise. It's really not even close. So Mario Kart World was sold at a higher price point because Nintendo put a lot of resources in it and they knew it would sell.
But that's not even the entire issue. There's another part that's a major problem with this. So people like to argue that $70 is the standard price for video games these days. I personally don't fall in line with that, because most $70 games have a discount pretty quickly after launch. And we're seeing that now with Nintendo as well, because their $70 games are not selling well.
Their $70 games are selling very well, Nintendeen. What are you talking about? Where's your evidence? Okay, what are you trying to pull here? Like, what are you claiming? Like, all of the Nintendo first party exclusives have been doing very, 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 very well. There's just no denying it at this stage. And yet he's still trying to tell people that they're not selling well, that they're failing, and that like the discounted editions of physical copies you see on store shelves are somehow an indication of that, when in reality that simply isn't true. You can look at the actual numbers, and it's very clear that Nintendo Switch 2 is selling a lot of games.
In any case, whenever a game launches with more than $70, it includes something additional with it. So, Sonic Racing Crossworlds, for example, if you wanted to buy the game, you could buy it for $90 for the Digital Deluxe Edition when it first launched. That comes with a Season Pass. Now, I still regularly play Sonic Racing Crossworlds. Obviously, it's not a daily game anymore, but I play it as much as I used to play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Basically, every few days, you feel like doing a Grand Prix with your friends, I jump on, we play 1 or 2 Grand Prix, and then we're good for another few days. I am still shocked that to this day, sometimes I open up the game and I just see updates of new tracks or new characters or just random gimmies, and I'm like, yo, like, they could stop doing this from now and the game's good, but they still have more characters coming down the line. That's a game that charges more than $70 and it gives you additional content for whatever you're paying beyond $70.
Is this retard really saying that a $90 edition of Sonic Racing Crossworlds is a better deal than $80 Mario Kart because you keep getting new characters, tracks, and like content? Like, is he serious? What's he talking about? This is why nobody takes Nintendeen seriously. Like, the double standard of just how he treats other companies versus how he treats Nintendo, it's ridiculous. It is straight up insane.
Shoot, even Pokemon and Bonanza, as egregious and unwelcome the additional price that you had to pay for their DLC was, still provided you more beyond the base game for paying more than $70. The new LEGO Batman game gives you a physical bonus when you buy the game for more than $70. Resident Evil Requiem gave you additional classic titles if you paid more than $70. Madden NFL 26 Deluxe Edition, you pay $100, and guess what? You get more stuff because you're paying more than $70. Even the Switch 2 edition games that I mentioned previously that were being sold for $80, they offer bonus content in comparison to the Switch 1 game. So I've given you like a pretty broad range of examples. I've given you another kart racer. I've given you the stuff that people consider people that mindlessly spend unnecessarily on this stuff like Call of Duty and Madden. I've given you examples within Nintendo, games that people love like Bonanza and games that people hate like Pokemon. It's basically industry-wide across every single console and every single genre. If you pay more than $70, you get more. And people knew this because once again, when they mentioned that Mario Kart World was going to be an $80 title, the biggest defense around that price was people expected that there would be regularly new things added to the title. People kept talking about, they're like, oh, around the 40th anniversary, they'll probably add like a new character, a new track and relate it to Mario. And then, you know, once the holidays come around, they'll add some new skins and new characters and new costumes, potentially even a remix of some new tracks. And everybody kept suggesting, they're like, oh, even in Mario Kart 8, when that came out, they added more stuff to that game, completely ignoring that nothing was added to that game once it launched on the Switch, until way later when the Booster Course came out. And the only reason people even got Booster Course tracks was because those tracks were made for the Mario Kart Tour mobile game. Otherwise, Nintendo never would have added tracks to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe because it was already selling well enough. And the thing is with Mario Kart is that it's always going to sell, especially when it's bundled in with a console. So why would they waste their time adding more content to a title for free if it's already making them a crap ton of money? But they swore there would regularly be content added, and people ate it right up. And it's been an entire year, and there has not been anything added to that game.
This is not true. A new battle mode was added. Again, they keep saying this. They keep saying that nothing's come to the game, nothing's been released for it. You know, it's been a full year, and it's just like, do you really think this is going to be something that they're going to pump out like a major update for into the first year when people are still picking up the console? You know what I mean? Like, they could theoretically drop new content for this like whenever they want. And I feel like this is something that Nintendo doesn't really want to address, because if you look at like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, right? They added the DLC for that game like years after the port, right? And he can cope about the Mario Kart Tour tracks all he wants, but there were a handful of original tracks. You know, they did have to up-res them. They did have to, like, you know, put them in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You know, like, there are things about that game that are just like, the fact that I got that huge of an update is a really strong indication of like where the industry is going. You know, we got an update for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, okay, that made it the definitive version of that game, like a full year after launch, right? Like we've seen this happen like several times over the past several years. So like I do think it's something that we really do need to talk about, is that with these Nintendo evergreen Nintendo titles, they could, with modern technology, update them whenever the fuck they want. And that could be years down the line. And I think Mario Kart World is a very good example of that. Why would they update games now when it is still selling and it is still brand new? There's no reason to do that.
And every single time there's this dumb update of something being added to Nintendo, I'm hoping that they add something to Mario Kart World. I want them to add something to it. People spent a lot of money on this game. It's the flagship title of the console. They should be giving more to the people that bought it. And if there is indeed a Nintendo Direct next week, I'm really hoping they're like, oh hey, 1 year later, Mario Kart World, the fastest game selling bundle thingy, whatever, in the first year of any console in history. Here's some more reason, more content for it. Something in the open world, some new tracks, anything. Shoot, at this rate, I think even an update where they just allow you to play the no intermissions with the Grand Prix would be great. Because remember, the game now is objectively worse than it was when it launched because they took that away from people. But nothing has been added to this $80 game, and it's the only $80 game in the industry right now that offers nothing additional. Now, mind you, this is not to say that I think that games should not be released complete, right? This is going to be the counter argument that people make. They're like, well, I'd rather pay $80 for a completed title than have something that's incomplete. But the counter to that is when you look at Mario Kart World, show me what part of it looks like it's a complete $80 game. Which part of it suggests that it justifies the price tag? Is it the underwhelming overworld that has no substance? Or the shoehorned intermission tracks that they require you to play whether you like it or not?
I'm pretty sure the fact that everybody is raising their prices more than justifies Nintendo's decision to do this. Again, are you going to see these kinds of people address this when Grand Theft Auto 6 inevitably launches at like $100? Like, I doubt you're going to hear jack shit.
The game, since it launched, has left a lot to be desired. And look, this is not me arguing that the game is bad. At the end of the day, it's Mario Kart. But that's the thing. It's just Mario Kart. Like, why is Mario Kart trying to set the standard for the new price tag? You know, we got GTA 6 coming soon, right? If I'm a gambler, I'd say that game is probably going to be more than $70. Now, to be very clear, I don't like that it's $70. I'm not even really a Grand Theft Auto fan. I was the guy that bought Wind Waker HD when it released 3 days after Grand Theft Auto 5, and completely skipped over Grand Theft Auto 5. But, at the very least, if Grand Theft Auto released more than $70, I'd be like, that makes sense, even if I don't like it. Right, this is a game that every single studio just announced all of their titles are launching in like September and October to avoid the launch window of Grand Theft Auto 5. It's a massive title. It's going to like shake the gaming world.
First of all, I really love how he tries to glaze this idea that Grand Theft Auto 6 deserves to be sold at a higher price point than Mario Kart World just because it's Grand Theft Auto. You see a lot of this in the community. A lot of people don't seem to realize that Mario Kart is actually bigger than Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto, it's the kind of franchise that falls off pretty quickly once the newer entries comes out. In comparison, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is going to sell indefinitely. Secondly, and I do think this does need to be acknowledged more in the community, Nintendo has nothing to fear from Rockstar. You are delusional if you think there's any overlap between Nintendo fans, actual gamers, versus the kind of troglodytes that pick up Grand Theft Auto 6. Like, the simple fact of the matter is, Nintendo's probably going to be releasing major titles on the same day that Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, sell well, and selling new products indefinitely. Like, this is the problem with the Rockstar formula and with Grand Theft Auto in general, is that they are too reliant on this idea that they are the biggest, best thing in entertainment, and it's really not something that holds up under any kind of scrutiny whatsoever. Mario Kart is actually bigger than Grand Theft Auto, because people always love saying that Grand Theft Auto has sold like 200 million units, but what they don't really talk about is how heavily discounted it is, how they give it away, how many consoles they've re-released it for. Like, the simple fact of the matter is Mario Kart is a far more popular franchise than Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto only coasts off its legacy as an edgy franchise. At a certain point, it's going to go down the same path that Mortal Kombat did, where that edginess becomes something that people think makes it not cool.
Grand Theft Auto 5 is still the best-selling games of the year for 2026, and that game came out back in 2013. And again, this is not a defense of how expensive Grand Theft Auto 6 will be, but it makes sense. Unfortunately, the only people that Mario Kart World makes sense to being charged at $80 for is Nintendo fans, and even then, most of them are not okay with it. The big reason Nintendo fans like myself and so many of you had a big issue with the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, and specifically with Mario Kart World, was because we're like, this is a joke, right? You're charging $80 for Mario Kart, specifically because it's Mario Kart, and that's not right. I don't see a larger game. I don't see a bigger budget. I don't even see a better game. I don't see a justification outside of the fact that it's just the name. And at that point, that tells me that Nintendo is basically charging for a game because they know people will buy it regardless. Increases prices for no other reason than they know that you're gonna buy it. And that's problematic. That's why I haven't spent money on Nintendo in the last year, because it makes no sense to spend money for lesser quality stuff just because I have nostalgia for it. I need to see a justification for the price tag, and for Mario Kart World, without a doubt, there is no justification for the $80 price tag. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, if they do actually add additional content to Mario Kart World, I still think they're going to charge for it. Or at the very least, it's locked behind Nintendo Switch Online. And if that were to happen, that means that even with the $80 price tag and the additional content that was made, the $80 was not enough to get the full experience.
Is this retard really trying to imply that paying for an online subscription is somehow the same thing as, like, locking it behind a paywall? Like, what? He's acting like you're paying for a subscription to pay for Mario Kart World Online and not for online features in general and all the other benefits you get as a member and all that. And it's like $50 a year. Okay, what is he talking about? What is he talking about? I don't understand this mentality. I don't understand what he means by this. Like, why is he telling us that this is a problem? And meanwhile, he's glazing something like Grand Theft Auto 5, which actively has microtransactions, which is the only reason that game was as successful as it was. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, essentially.
Now, here's the funny thing about Mario Kart World. An overwhelming majority of the people that bought it did not pay $80 for it. So Nintendo knows that it's not worth $80. Otherwise, they would never offer a discount for it. They stopped creating Mario Kart World bundles around December. In Japan, pretty much as soon as they stopped developing the Mario Kart World bundles, those immediately stopped selling, right? Because in Japan, the Switch 2 has been in high demand since it launched, and even with its sales collapsing this week in Japan, that's still obviously because they pulled a lot of the demand forward when they increased the price over there. It's the same thing that happened with PS5 right now. It had one of the slowest months of May, and that's because it pulled a lot of its demand forward when they were talking about the price increases last month. And you're still going to see grifters out there talking about how the Switch 2 and the PS5 sales collapsed after their price increase. It's like, no, people just bought it earlier because there was an announcement of a price increase coming soon. And especially because it was a very short window. So you had like a very quick turnaround in Japan, like 2 weeks. You got to get out there, buy a Switch 2 as fast as you can before it goes up in price. So obviously the hype was all there. It's already a console that was selling very well over there. Now it started to do even better. So naturally, after that price goes up, the sales slowed down this week. But that's just a sidebar. In December, they stopped doing the Mario Kart World bundles, and in Japan, pretty much almost immediately, Mario Kart World sales started to slow down in comparison because there were fewer bundles in circulation. In the States, the Mario Kart World bundle was pretty much still readily available at every single retailer up until March, where the spike happened when Pokepia launched, so it took an additional 3 months to sell out through the, 200,000 or 300,000 units that were still available for Mario Kart World bundles. Now, Mario Kart World, again, this is a game that's still going to sell. It's always going to sell. It's French fries. You buy a Switch 2, you get Mario Kart with the console. Even the worst Mario Kart is going to sell. It's the same idea as Call of Duty. It's the same idea as Pokemon. It's the same idea as Madden, FIFA, those games that the casuals are going to buy regardless. However, there was a notable drop-off in the amount of sales Mario Kart World had when the bundles stopped. Keep in mind, for the better part of last year, through most of the Switch 1's first 6 or 7 months, the standalone version of the Nintendo Switch 2 for $450 was not even available. For the most part, it was the Mario Kart World bundle that was available, so many people were buying that game even if they didn't want it. And many people were talking about how well Mario Kart World was selling, and it's like doing amazing numbers, and people are buying a Switch 2 for it. Unsurprisingly, however, as soon as the bundles were discontinued, Mario Kart World sales came to an abrupt halt.
15 million units sold on a 20 million install base. Like, I don't understand how he's even making this argument. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So you're going to tell me that Mario Kart World mysteriously stopped selling when you can look at the numbers and understand like that everyone already owns it. Like I don't understand this. Like, people are buying the game when they get Switch 2s, but over the past couple of months, people have been picking up the Switch 2 are getting Pokapia. But, people will get Mario Kart as well. Again, the game is still very clearly selling, but it's a year old now. Sales are probably going to slow down a little bit as we start getting into the major releases of this year. And like NIntendeen is just like, no, it's completely stopped, bro. It stopped selling. And I'm just like, this is going to be an evergreen title. What is he talking about?
And this is not even something that I noticed or I would be pointing out. This is something that the shareholders noticed. The 8th question in the most recent shareholder meeting. Sales of Mario Kart World seem to have slowed down since shipments of the hardware bundle concluded in December. What is your assessment of the reasons behind this? Furukawa's answer. Mario Kart World is a game that we would like to continue selling throughout the lifecycle of the Nintendo Switch 2. Going forward, we will continue to convey its appeal to consumers to expand its popularity as an evergreen title. Guess what they did? They bundled it again. That's their solution to making this title evergreen and still appealing to people. It slowed down. It stopped being bundled from March until May. It barely lasted 3 months and already they're like, oh, this thing's slowing down way too much. We better put it back in with the console so people can actually buy it.
The new bundles are different than the old bundles, right? So they just made a shift where they sold out of the Mario Kart World bundle, which was already always planned to be a limited time thing. And now they're just like, oh yeah, now you'll buy a console and then it'll come with, one game of your choosing. I don't know exactly what it is. I think you have a choice between Mario Kart World and Bonanza, I believe. So again, they're giving you like a little bit of flexibility when it comes to like your console purchases and what you pick up and all that. So like, again, the idea that like Mario Kart World is slowing down after like a monumental release period after its success, it's really underestimating, I think, this game's long-term appeal. Again, because we saw this happen with Super Mario Bros. Wonder as well, right? Where we were told that like this game underperformed, nobody cares about it, it's a disaster, the NES Mario is better. What happens? Over the past 3 years, it's sold like 20 million units. And that was a game that was pretty successfully buried when it came out. Like, everybody thought it had failed. Everybody like wrote it off and thought it wouldn't be a huge hit, but like 3 years later, after the expansion, after the re-release, like, it's pretty clear that Wonder has established itself as a beloved Mario game. My personal favorite 2D Mario of all time, if not my favorite Mario game ever. So when you take that into consideration, you just can't take this kind of thing seriously, because Grand Theft Auto 5 did not sell 200 million units in 2013. Like, it got to that point through aggressive price cuts, through a long period of time, and being pretty much the only game available on Xbox and PlayStation for the past decade. Mario Kart World, in comparison, is a much more popular game that's launching alongside other games that people actually want to play. The majority of the Grand Theft Auto audience is only going to play Grand Theft Auto for the entire time that they own a PlayStation or an Xbox, while Nintendo owners are obviously going to experiment with other games like Pokopia, like Donkey Kong Bonanza, like Kirby Air Riders. The sky's the limit when it comes to Switch 2, right? We have like endless options. We really can't get hung up over this idea that sales have stopped or they're slowing down or that games are underperforming, because what we see over and over and over again is that simply isn't true. If anything, considering the sheer amount of times we have seen this play out where people insist that a Nintendo game is underperformed only for it to go on to be the highest selling entry in its respective franchise, whether it's Yoshi or Fire Emblem, or whether it's like, Splatoon, I think went through this, Animal Crossing New Horizons, you still see people trying to argue that Animal Crossing New Horizons only sold as well as it did because of the pandemic. Like, the simple fact of the matter is Nintendo has has a number of franchises that are way, way, way more popular than Grand Theft Auto 5. The issue is that Grand Theft Auto 5 is the only game that a certain demographic of people are interested in playing. You know, I'm talking stoners. I'm talking people living in the ghetto. I'm talking about poor people, okay? Like Grand Theft Auto at its core is a poor
Mario
man's
Kart World
video
is
game.
not an $80 game. It was being used and marketed as an $80 game to justify so many different price increases across the industry, and especially specifically in the Nintendo ecosystem. The egregious prices for Mario Kart World happened prior to Rampocalypse, pretty much prior to tariffs, and prior to a whole frickin' conflict overseas. It was just there to move the bar a little bit, and we saw that pretty quickly after that when Borderlands was like, oh hey, Mario Kart's doing it, we're gonna try it too. The difference is Borderlands was never offered as a bundle for $50, so they had to backtrack and change it to $70. In Mario Kart World's case, they bundle it, they trick people into thinking they're getting a good value for a game and it's like a deal with the console, but in actuality there's no deal here. You're just getting charged a $30 physical tax if you're buying the game physically for the Switch 2. Which the majority of Nintendo fans prefer physical over digital. Mario Kart World, if it was being sold at a standard price, would be going physically for $70. But they've kept that $80 price tag hovered around the title. They've kept it as a flagship $80 game going along with this console, and they just keep that $80 number next to it at all times, so people, every time they look at it, they're like, oh, Mario Kart World's $80. And it's such a good game, it's selling out, it's the fastest selling game in the Nintendo Switch 2, and people just slowly start to accept it, and then they see like the controller is $90, they see the Nintendo Switch 2 edition games are also $80, and all this stuff does not cause an uproar, because they're normalizing the bar and the floor for these games that they've shifted with Mario Kart World, by selling it at $80, or even just having it advertised as an $80 game. I mean, look at what it says with the bundles when you buy the game. It tells you, you saved $30 for buying this. It makes it seem like it's a deal because they overcharged for this game that's not an $80 title. And they know it's not an $80 title, because as soon as they stopped selling it as a bundle, the sales collapsed for Mario Kart World. So what did they do? They turned right back around and they bundled it again.
Okay, we've already talked a lot about how the game sales have not slowed down. Like, this retard is really arguing that, like, the game sales collapsed in March and, like, setting up another bundle is, like, some panic move when, like, they clearly planned that out in advance. Like, it's not – they don't make these kind of decisions unilaterally, essentially. They're not just going to suddenly, like, make radical changes to their immediate business plans because of this idea that, like, a game's – sales tanked for like 2 months. That doesn't make any sense. But second of all, and I think more importantly, something that he's just not addressing at all when it comes to this video, because he keeps saying this, like, Mario Kart World is $80. Mario Kart World is $80. Bundle. Like, why don't you just buy the bundle? Because he keeps doing this thing where he's like, oh man, if you want to buy Mario Kart World, it's going to cost you $80. And I'm just like, just buy the bundle. Again, it's a very simple solution to this problem, and yet people like NIntendeen want to act like it's an unreasonable thing to point out. Like, they want to act like this is some unreasonable issue that's like really seriously holding them back. They really want to act like this is like the bundle is like offensive to them. They really want to act like, oh man, I'm only saving $30. Like, but the $80 game is too expensive. Like, what's he talking about? Like, if you're having a problem with the price point for Mario Kart World, the easiest thing to do would be to just get the bundle. But that's not a solution that NIntendeen wants. Like, he wants Nintendo to just lower the price for the game itself for some reason, even though that's not really something that Nintendo needs to be doing right now.
All of this could be solved by just saying, hey, Mario Kart World is not an $80 game. We made a mistake on that one, just like the Borderlands folks did. We're going to sell it physically for $70 and then digitally for $60. But if you buy it as a bundle, it's only $50. Just a simple press release like that would backtrack all of the issues that were caused and created so much hate for the Switch 2, more specifically for the $80 price tag that was slapped on Mario Kart World. But that would be a sign of weakness for Nintendo, and they can't do signs of weaknesses, because that would imply they did something wrong, and their shareholders will not like that. But look, whatever the case is, at the end of the day, Mario Kart World is clearly not worth $80. Unquestionably not worth $80. It's not even debatable. Even if you bought the game for $80 and you like the game at $80, just because for you might think, hey, this is good, that would be like me overpaying for a game that's worth $40 and coming out and being like, hey, I liked it, so it's worth $80. And I do believe it's a game that could have been worth $80. And I'm specifically saying that in past tense. I'm not saying that the game can be worth $80 in the future. I'm saying, no, it could have been worth $80 in the past. Because even if they add more to the game now and they try to make it more appealing to people so that they can pay $80 for this game, at that point, you're buying a 1-year-old title. And almost every single game outside of Nintendo games that was released last year around this time is not still being sold at full price. Or at the very least, it was heavily discounted regularly throughout the last year. So even if they added more content and it happened to be free for Mario Kart World going forward, at that point you're overpaying for an old game that for all intents and purposes should have had a price drop by now. So it will never be worth $80. The $80 price tag that was slapped onto this title was nothing more than a marketing tool to normalize the higher software prices that we've seen ever since the launch of this console. Because as we've seen for an entire year, nothing was added, even though every single major Nintendo YouTuber argued for months that it would be. In any case, that's all I have for right now. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.
I love how he just comes out and admits that like there's nothing that Nintendo could possibly do to make this game $80. There's nothing that they could possibly do to make him happy with this product. It's just so straightforward. He's just like, he's being way too open about his intentions here. Like, no, I don't like Mario Kart. I don't play Mario Kart. I only care about it so I can grift. It's just laughably stupid. And what's this bit about games being overly expensive? Because if you've looked at the past year, nothing has been as expensive as Mario Kart World. Like Bonanza was $70. Pokemon Legends ZA was $70. Metroid Prime 4 was $70. Kirby Air Riders was $70. And now we're seeing Star Fox, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. They're launching at $60. Like $50 if you're buying digital. So like we're definitely seeing like a push for Nintendo to lower prices, especially for their lower budget stuff. Rhythm Heaven's at $40, right? Like we're seeing like a huge push to like normalize these lower budget games, but like Nintendeen's not acknowledging that, and like none of these people are acknowledging it. Like you have people like Angry Joe trying to tell people that like Nintendo is selling Mario Kart World for $90 when in reality you have situations like Star Fox where like the prices have significantly dropped under certain circumstances, right? Yeah, it was about the budget. It was about the resources put into the game. It was about like digital distribution. They've incorporated like lower sales digitally for the first time ever, which should have been seen as a pro-consumer move. But in the eyes of Nintendeen, that is seen as not good enough because there is nothing that will ever be good enough. I'm Harman Smith. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.